I'm Geremy Thomas. I'm CEO of Sativa Investments, and I invite you now to listen to my podcast with Professionally Cannabis.
Where do they go, the smoke rings I blow each night? Oh, what do they do, those circles of blue and white?
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I don't know when you pressed play on this bad boy. I'm Oscar Houseman, and welcome to Professionally Cannabis with my co-host, Johnny Weiser.
Hi. How's it going, Oscar?
It's going pretty well. So today's guest is our first fellow Brit. I'm pretty pumped for that.
It was a great interview. A couple of weeks back, me and Oscar went to Westbury to interview Geremy Thomas, the CEO of Sativa Investments.
A lot more rustic than our normal interview locations.
For those of you that don't know, we're interviewing out of a studio in Old Street in central London.
Yeah, which is a little bit more grimy and urban than Dogfield Fields.
Less hemp.
Less hemp, more cannabis.
That's certainly true. Anyway, that's enough from us. Hear it from the cannabis himself, Geremy Thomas. Enjoy.
Circles of blue and white.
Our guest today is Geremy Thomas, CEO of Sativa Investments, a next listed cannabis investment vehicle. Geremy is a serial entrepreneur with companies across telecoms, financial services, and clay pigeon shooting in Antigua. With that background, it's probably no surprise that Sativa Investments goes across the value chain and cannabis ecosystem. Thanks for joining us today, Geremy.
Pleasure.
So, Geremy, a question that we ask all our guests on Professionally Cannabis. What led you to the plant?
I have a house in Vancouver and was invited to a Canaccord Weed conference, and I was blown away by the amount of inward investment into this new industry, and my instincts as an entrepreneur led me to do some work here in the UK and see what I could put together, and that coincided with meeting the boss of the Next Exchange, who had some personal experience of the benefits of CBD and was very welcoming and supportive, and really that was the start of the journey that's led us to today's business.
And can we talk about the journey and the brands in your stable? So was, for instance, George Botanicals your most well-known brand, perhaps, the start for Sativa?
No, George Botanicals was the first foray into the CBD wellness world, which is the biggest part of our business currently. And we are a manufacturer, wholesaler and retailer of a range of CBD wellness products manufactured here at our head office.
I understand that you'll be launching a series of wellness centres across the UK. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the key value metrics for this industry are brand and distribution. And we've been monitoring the success of the vaping stores on our high streets. And we're obviously aware of a specialty coffee market out there. And we think there is a space for a CBD wellness store. There's clearly a high level of interest here from the general public at large. And there is nowhere for them to go to get quality advice. And we want to provide that advice and make those sales on the high street. So we have a brand called Good Body and Blunt. And we shall be opening our first store in Bath in the next few weeks. And we have a very cool location in the middle of town.
And with Good Body and Blunt, what's the demographics you're going to be going with it? Is the name a reference to the blunt of cannabis culture?
It's a great name.
Clearly, Good Body is all about wellness, and Blunt references to cannabis, but really, I just like the name. I thought it resonated well. Our ambition for that brand is to take it to 100 stores plus. We've recruited a chap called Chris Jones, who's our managing director for that business. His experience is extensive on the high street. He was responsible for the Phones For You brand, which was a big mobile phone brand here in the UK. And more recently, he's worked with a vaping company that had over 110 stores. So recent and relevant experience, and he'll be pushing that project forward for us.
And let's talk about how Sativa Investments has perhaps transformed from an investment vehicle into more of an operating body with the recent news of a commercial THC-rich cannabis grow being planned for Wiltshire, is it?
Well, the journey was really a reflection of the regulatory regime here. So when we started out, there was no indication that we would have a shift in our position. And so the company was set up as an investment vehicle to allow UK investors to access Canadian medicinal cannabis companies. And really, that was the way we perceived our future. And in one of the first interviews I gave, I was asked when I believed the regulations would change here. And I put it at between 2 and 3 years. It turned out to be 4 to 5 months. So
we were all wrong-sided by that.
Well, no, but that's a great thing. And we've changed our strategy accordingly. And we're now very much an operating company. We have George Botanicals as a fast-growing trading business. We've invested in a laboratory business called Phytovista Laboratories. When I was traveling in North America, I noticed there was a clear bottleneck between manufacturers and the dispensaries as the lab businesses out there were struggling to cope with demand for batch testing of products. It's key that this function is available for the market here in the UK. We announced a couple of weeks ago that we've completed our 1,000th test for the UK CBD market. And I think it's going to be a very lucrative business. It also positions our company well in terms of the regulators. It gives us credibility and it gives us capability to produce trusted products with the chosen brands that we work with.
Moving to being more focused around being a seed-to-consumer company rather than an investment vehicle, what does that do for you guys in terms of your ability to raise funds, raise investments and diversify the portfolio?
Well, we haven't had trouble raising money. When we listed at IPO, we had 1.6 million. $1 million of that was mine, but the rest of it were sort of followers from previous lives. We then did a placing 8 months ago for 3.75 million. And in between those two events, we secured investment from Miton, who are an award-winning investment fund. So we don't see a problem raising money for the business here in the UK.
And in becoming sort of more fully integrated, the strategy moving forward, is that going to be more focused around M&A or launching businesses from the ground?
No, I'm an old-fashioned entrepreneur that likes to build businesses, and I'm interested in revenue, and I need to know that the profits are on the horizon. So that's why we have a very practical approach to the businesses that we have. So George Botanicals, Phytovista Laboratories, which is fast growing, and then we look forward to the Good Body and Blunt business. So the strategy there is for us to open 3 stores under our own steam. We will then analyse the results, and then we are going to look to aggressively franchise those stores throughout the UK with a target of 100 stores in 2 years. So that's going to be another interesting and profitable business.
What will the experience be like for consumers in those 100 stores? Is it a coffee shop? Is it an information experience? And how do you convey that? I assume it will be a premium experience.
It will. It'll be closer to Apple than the current, some would say, CD vaping stores on the high street. And no, we want it to be a very high quality, clean, informative experience. And we will be not only selling our own products, but the best products from the market, which will be tested by our own laboratory, and nothing will be sold unless we're happy with the quality and we understand exactly what's in the product and where it comes from.
And what role will your stores have in terms of educating the wider market who might not be so informed already on cannabis-derived products?
I think that's exactly what we're going to be doing, because there's a lot of national press interest in CBD products, but really, other than reading favourable articles, there's nowhere where consumers can get face-to-face information, and that's what we intend to provide.
And how do you hope to get around the intractable problem of not being able to provide medical advice when for many people it's CBD's therapeutic properties that are most attractive?
People are aware of that. We can't make medicinal claims, nor will we, but we can talk about the quality of the products. We can talk about the different types of products, and it's pretty obvious if you're presenting a cosmetic product that you're likely to apply it to your face and it's going to have some benefit. But no, we're not going to be saying if you have MS, this is going to help you. If you have sleeping problems, this is going to help you. But we can allude to the fact that CBD makes you zing. It's a wellness product, and you'll feel better if you have some.
And I know that you guys have got a partnership with KCL looking at cannabis for inflammatory and respiratory illnesses. Will that be helping the CBD side of the business or more of the medicinal cannabis side of the business?
Right. So I think the regulators here are being put under top-down pressure from the politicians to catch up in the medicinal cannabis space. They are calling for more research, and we are happy to be a part of that. It's as much for us a licensing play, because licensing, I think, will be key and it'll be very difficult to achieve here in the short term. So we have one of 18 low THC cultivation licenses, and for our listeners that are on radio and not on TV, if we look out the window, you can see we're sitting here on an 160-acre farm, and we grew our first crop of industrial hemp last season. We'll be replanting shortly for this season. We seek a THC-rich growing cultivation and extraction license, and we feel confident that we will get that, and we are working with the Home Office with that in mind. We have a grow facility here, which is up and running and growing tomatoes. We have extraction facilities within our phytovista laboratory, which is also here. And the Home Office are engaged with us, have been down to see us. We've been reacting to some of their requests for additional security cameras, electric gates. We're at that level of detail. And why I believe they will give us this license is that we have a clear purpose, which is to supply product to King's College London for the research activities that we're supporting through our Sativa Foundation. So the research part of our business and the effort we've put into putting together a very senior advisory board helps us navigate the regulatory challenges that are significant here in the UK.
What's your plans further afield?
We have a joint venture in Germany. We see that Germany is well ahead of us in terms of medicinal cannabis. We're interested in supplying the German market in the future. But we're focused here. We think that the UK is going to be the biggest medicinal cannabis market. We believe that because of the number of people here and the demographics of our population. A large number of people, a lot of whom are older and would benefit from these products.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of anxiety floating around London as well.
If you look at the Canadian market, where the patients come from and the numbers of them, and relate that to revenue, and you look at what's happening in Germany, then I think you'll understand that the UK is going to be where it's at.
And is that also from an adult use or recreational side? And can you maybe look into your crystal ball and tell us how you think those regulations might shake out for Europe and the UK?
Very interesting. I was just chatting to a colleague yesterday who's just returned from Italy, and they have this cannabis light policy down there where THC products can be made available, providing they are limited to low levels of THC, yeah. So I think that's a very interesting model. I think talking about recreational use in the UK at the moment is premature, and I think that would just spook the regulators here, and that's something that we don't want to do. We're a medicinal cannabis company and a CBD wellness company. However, I believe personally that night will follow day, and we will eventually get to a recreational market. But we're certainly not, it's not any part of our forecasts at the moment.
And with the cannabis light players, who I think that was pioneered by a company called Easy Joint in Italy, there's a lot of what's called CBD Flower in Southern Europe. Now, you guys have a large industrial hemp capacity. Would you be able to divert it to CBD Flower should that come online? Would you have interest in products along those sort of lines?
Yes. Would I have interest in those products? Yes. Are we ready for them? No, not yet. But I mean, I see the UK being 6 years behind the rest of the markets around the world, and we just have to catch up. But we have to do it in a way we have to have empathy to the regulators that are making these decisions about our marketplace, and we have to have influence, and that's what Sativa is all about. The chairman of our medical advisory board is Sir Alistair Breckenridge. He's the ex-chairman of the MHRA, medical health regulator. We have put together a senior team of advisors that can help us navigate the regulatory environment and also give credibility to the work that we're already doing as a company with research and engaging with our regulators.
If you had one message to give to the regulators, except for hurry up, What would it be?
Okay, I think they are trying to apply a regime that is not relevant to medicinal cannabis. So the Home Office, the licensing team that we deal with are basically the shotgun and firearms licensing team who naturally are there to say no. You know, the whole ethos is no. So that's not ideal. The Food Standards Agency is now dealing with CBD and is pushing us into a novel foods model, which we are supportive of, and we're working with them to put forward our products as one of the first to go through that process. But really, my view is that we should have a cannabis agency here in the UK that brings in all those responsibilities under one leadership. And that's we've seen that around the world. That's not a unique position, because it's very difficult for the current regulators to get their head around how this industry is going to develop.
And what sort of connection do you have with industry trade bodies like the Cannabis Trade Association and other folks like that?
We work with the Cannabis Trade Association. They recommend our laboratory, Phytovista Laboratory, and we are a preferred partner of theirs. We're also supporters of the CMC, which is, I think, doing some great work in terms of providing high quality information for government and others interested in the UK medicinal cannabis market.
On the point about regulators and talking about Phytovista in particular, I know that the Californian regulators do not allow a company to hold both a testing laboratory and a cultivation facility. Now, presumably that would not be your ideal regulatory outcome for the UK, but what would your ideal regulatory outcome be? How do you think the cannabis agency that you talk about should deal with cannabis from a monopoly point of view and from a quality point of view?
Well, clearly, with our Phytovista laboratory hat on, testing of products is key to the industry. I mean, batch testing of anything is where we're at. We're interested in cannabinoid content, we're interested in heavy metals, we're interested in pesticides, and we're interested in mycotoxins. That's a given, and that needs to be part of the process. As far as product approval is concerned, we, with our Sativa hat on, naturally don't want the UK to be flooded with Canadian and other external manufactured products. We want a homegrown industry here, excuse the pun. And, we are advocates of that. So that's part of the future landscape for the UK, which I'm pushing for.
Great. So I believe I saw a press release saying George Botanicals was targeting 1.5 million in sales this year. How much of the CBD market do you reckon that is? And what's your view on the CBD market in totality, the growth, the future opportunities, and within Europe as well?
I think because of the inevitable delay in the UK medicinal cannabis market, the delay caused by the challenges of education and getting the regulators comfortable, I see the CBD wellness business being a big driver of revenues for us as Sativa. I think the CBD market in the UK is growing fast. There needs to be a bit more control over who's playing in that marketplace in terms of quality. With our lab hat on, we see quite a few products coming in to be tested that claim to have XYZ percentage of different cannabinoids. Some of them have none. Some of them have more THC than should be in there. So I think there are issues around quality. And I think the Food Standards Agency getting a grip of it is something that we support. So that will come. But as far as the prospects for the market, I think it's extremely positive. I mean, people enjoy and get benefit from the product and repurchase, and that's what it's all about.
And with regard to the health and wellness market as a whole, obviously CBD right now is very much the cannabinoid flavor of the month, so to speak. Do you expect any other ranges using other cannabinoids like CBG, THCV to become more mainstream?
I don't think we should be confusing the consumer. So we can all marvel about the benefits of different cannabinoids, but I think that's a confusing message for the consumer, and we should just focus on CBD.
So you're waiting for the market to ripen in terms of consumer education, or is it more products should be from a consumer point of view? This will make me feel better. You can make a medical claim about it, and what's in the tin doesn't matter as long as it's well understood by clinicians.
Yeah, that's not a clear message. the CBD wellness product is one thing that we're pushing. Medicinal cannabis is the future, but it's going to be, a year or two down the track before we see some significant volumes. We want to be in that business. That's what we're all about. But in the meantime, we're very happy to be pushing forward in the CBD wellness markets. And the distribution that we create with CBD will have some relevance for medicinal cannabis in the future. So they are not two separate strategies.
Oh, totally makes sense. Now, on a sort of different tack, for someone whose career has previously spanned telecoms, e-learning, consumer finance, how does it feel to now be a cannabis?
Well, I'm doing it because I think on behalf of my shareholders and myself, we're going to build a valuable business which will be lucrative. I mean, that's what I do. So in the 80s, my uncle and I had one of the first cellular radio licenses in the UK. We went on to capture 10% of the UK market and sold it to Cable and Wireless. In the 90s, I took a telecoms business to the public markets. And more recently, with my brother, we set up an e-learning business called TMTI, Talk Me Through It, which has made over $1 million as a private company for the last 10 years and continues to thrive. You touched on clay pigeon shooting in Antigua. I actually retired to Antigua and spent 3 years living there, living the dream. But actually, it was very boring in the end. There's only so much rum you can drink. And so then I came back and I was casting around for things to do, and some city chums told me all about guarantor lending, which proved to be very lucrative for me and the team that we put together. It was really having the cash from that little adventure in my back pocket that led me to the cannabis opportunity. And I personally think this is going to be the biggest business that I've been involved with in my career, and it's probably going to be the last one because I'm 58 now and it's exhausting.
A life of Caribbean rum and cannabis. You're the envy of a lot of people, I imagine.
Well, I see there was obviously the Caribbean is it's in the culture for marijuana to be consumed, but I suppose my first real exposure to marijuana was this house that I have on an island in Howe Sound off Vancouver, where there are many BC bud enthusiasts that I count as my friends. So, yeah, it's interesting that I've ended up in the business, but I'm here because it's going to be a really big business here in the UK, and we are going to be the dominant player in Europe. And it'll take us time to get there, but we will definitely get there.
Of the other players in Europe, are there any that you particularly like? Do you have any stakes in, perhaps? Do you invest in other companies outside of your fund personally?
Yeah, I have quite a few investments around the world. The companies I admire, Bedrocan. I don't have any money in Bedrocan, but I've visited them, and I think they are a quality outfit, passionate about what they do. Yeah, I don't really spend a lot of time considering competition. I think from my experience, big players have a role to play here in the UK because it's all about education, and that's a significant task to be taken on by Sativa alone. So we welcome the likes of Tilray and Canopy and all the big guys. We welcome them playing in the UK market because that's going to help advance the prospects for the market and bring the market to bear faster.
For investors that might be listening to Professionally Cannabis that are interested in the market but may not have dipped their toes in so far, what would you say to them?
Buy some of my shares. No, I mean, we're the fifth largest company trading on NEX by volume. We regularly trade 2 to 3 million shares a day. On a big day, we'll trade 5 million shares. So there's a genuine liquidity in our stock. And because we're dealing in very small amounts, but if you invested with us at IPO at a penny, last week you would have increased your stake ninefold. So we were at 9p today. I think we're at 7. But, we have already provided significant returns for our investors, and we will continue to build on that value.
And how does being in charge of a listed company make you feel? We all know the story of Elon Musk on an interview similar to this, changing stock price through erratic behavior. Do you feel you now have an extra responsibility in your public-facing communications?
I was the CEO of a public company in the 90s, so I'm familiar with the responsibilities, and really it doesn't make me feel any different to running a private business. We chose to go down the public market route because we felt that there was a job to do in terms of building a big business, and access to capital markets is attractive in that context. We very much see ourselves at the forefront of the UK market. We have first mover advantage, and my job is to make sure that we can maintain that position, and that will require capital, and the public markets seem to be a sensible place to get that capital.
Something I'm always really interested in when we're speaking with cannabis CEOs is the team. Tell us about the guys that are driving Sativa Investments forward and the other businesses. Who are you looking to bring into the business?
It's a very good point. Talent is what it's all about, and it's identifying quality people and then empowering them to perform. So I'm very lucky to have Joseph Colliver as my CFO. Joseph was 10 years with WPP, very global business, and ran divisions within that company at huge scale. And I persuaded him to come across to the dark side into entrepreneurial life. And he took that leap of faith and will no doubt be rewarded from the options that he secured. And that's a key part of my strategy, which is to attract quality talent, to reward them with a reasonable salary, but really encourage those people to look to share options in our company as the way that they will eventually benefit along with the rest of our shareholders. So yes, Joseph's a key guy, but we have key guys throughout the business. Nick Horniman, we've recently taken on as our Regulatory Affairs Director. Once again, emphasis on relationships with the regulators. His role is to work across the range of regulators to make sure that their interests and ours are aligned. Chris Jones, we talked about earlier, the Good Body and Blunt retail rollout. Key guy, a lot of relevant experience, high degree of confidence in him. But there are many, in each of our businesses, we have talented people.
You mentioned Nick, and I believe I saw somewhere that he was brought on to do veterinary work, or at least perhaps guide that part of the business. We haven't discussed it yet, but it's an interesting proposition considering the current ban on CBD products for animals. How do you see that going?
We think the veterinary market is very attractive, and we want to be a lead player. So we have engaged with the VMD, the veterinary regulator, and we are pursuing a market authorization, product authorization with them. Now, they have been very clear that they see CBD as a medicine, and so we are working with them on clinical trials to get to a market authorization. I see that as an 18-month process, and it's going to be expensive, but I think it's the right thing for us to be doing, and I think the pet market is very exciting, and we look forward to providing CBD dog biscuits, CBD...
for the office dog?
we have Bumble, the office dog here, who is very receptive to all sorts of testing.
He looked happy when he greeted us.
He did look very happy. In terms of the veterinary market, sort of anecdotally, I know there are folks that are looking at developing CBD products for dogs, for cats, for horses even. Do you see the main market for animal care being around pet care, or sort of wider use within animals, maybe professional animals or others?
I think CBD is recognized to be a natural anti-inflammatory agent, and that's where we will focus our attention, because there is a clear and defined demand for vet-prescribed products in that area that we can compete with successfully. Nick Horniman had a number of veterinary practices that he brought to market and developed and then subsequently sold them. And so he has an intimate knowledge of how the margins work with different products. And they are constantly being squeezed, those margins, on the traditional suite of drugs that are available to vets. So I think we feel pretty confident that a CBD-based product would be welcomed by them, because we can offer them a greater margin opportunity, and we can offer the dogs or cats an alternative to powerful medicines that are currently being given to them that have potential for side effects, which we don't believe CBD has. So, yeah, we think it's going to be a big part of our future.
And it sounds like your plans are to wait for clinical trials and come to the UK market first. Have you considered perhaps distributing in Germany, where the regulation is slightly different, through your Lexamed German subsidiary?
So we have a joint venture in Germany with Lexamed. No, I think the job here is to get the regulatory piece done, and that will give us a significant advantage in the UK market, which we're excited about. And also, we have to be mindful that there's only so much we can do, so we have to be disciplined in where we want to do what we want to do and where we want to do it.
It's an interesting point you raise, because you are across the ecosystem, as we mentioned. Are there any projects that have come across your desk that you would have loved to be involved in, but they weren't core or syncretic enough with your current offering, so you had to let them go?
Well, one of our announcements in the past was that we had secured an option on a very big glasshouse for the UK, and I think my job as an entrepreneur and leading the Sativa team is to recognise when market conditions change that our approach should change. So we're now favouring a smart sourcing policy where we feel we could take advantage of not overproduction but plentiful production around the world of base raw materials, and we're probably going to focus more here on adding value to those raw materials by processing them and focusing on product development and brand and distribution.
On the point about brand, one thing that cannabis companies in particular like to associate with is perhaps the more ethical consumer mindset of, say, the current generation. Now, for instance, with your Wiltshire farm, there was mention in the press release that it was powered by a biodigester and so would be green from the beginning. How much does ethical sustainability or social justice concerns come into your business making?
I think if you have a product USP, you have an advantage over a competitor. And I think organic is more a USP that I would be interested in. That was certainly attractive in terms of the glasshouse site. But as I said, we're unlikely to be pursuing that glasshouse as it stands now. We feel that the market conditions have moved. So, I mean, with my investment fund hat on, everyone and their dog is approaching me saying that they're going to grow cannabis in exotic locations around the world. I think the market has moved on from the very early days in Canada, where the valuations of businesses and their prospects were driven by production capability. I think from our point of view, we see that we'll be successful in sourcing high quality products from around the world, from different players producing different products that we may well be interested in processing here and adding value. And that's where I think we're going to head.
Do you have particular seed providers of choice that you guys are scoping out at the moment?
We are forging relationships with growers, and we will be making announcements shortly about preferred partnerships that we've identified.
So one of the investees that we talked about briefly was Rapid Dose. Now, they've got an interesting route of delivery for cannabinoids, which is a strip that I believe goes under the tongue.
Yeah, sublingual strip. Very interesting company. Interesting for us because we invested in their business pre-IPO. They subsequently IPO'd and we've doubled our money on our stake. So I like that. But also I like the technology. So it's a sublingual strip. It enables us to deliver a finite dose, which is an important issue, because at the moment we're using tinctures or oils that are dripped from a pipette, and that can be a very clumsy way of delivering a finite dose because you can put too many drops in, not enough drops in. And so I like the sublingual strip delivery system. I also like the fact that it goes straight into your bloodstream, so it is not affected by the liver if it goes through your stomach, or the lungs if you're smoking or vaping products. So yeah, Rapid Dose Therapeutics, good company, good management team, good product. We hope to work with them here in the UK.
And when it comes to the strategy for your overall group investments, is there any area that you feel, we're not quite covering, but I'd like to find a company in that space? And what would they be doing?
We're interested in extraction and extraction technologies, and so we have yet to decide on which way we go. We will probably have all the technologies available to us, and I'm interested in that area. And that's a fast-moving part of the industry, which we are keeping an eye on.
Because when it comes to extraction, I think I saw a quote from one of the people at George Botanicals. Is it called George? Is he called George?
George, yes. Now, George was very successful for me in the lending business, so George Botanicals flowed from that. But there is a chap called George, who's my son, who's a very competent guy, who no doubt you're quoting from.
Yes, well, I was going to talk about the extraction license. So he mentioned that there wasn't currently an extraction license for George Botanicals. Can you talk us through the number of licenses you have to have in order to operate?
He was probably referring to our Medicinal Cannabis extraction license, which we're working with the Home Office on now. So coming back to our research activities, so King's College London will be asking for oils of different cannabinoid combinations. And so to get those products for them, we need to grow the plants and then we need to extract the oils. And those two activities require licensing. So we hope to have one of the first licenses to do that.
Geremy, any final takeaways for our listeners of Professionally Cannabis?
Yeah, I think the message is the UK market will be big. We are well behind the curve. As I said earlier, 5 or 6 years, but we will get there and we will be the biggest medicinal cannabis market in Europe.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Good. Okay. It is Professionally Cannabis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where do they go, the smoke rings I blow each night? Oh, what do they do, those circles of blue and white?
We hope you enjoyed that interview, and if you did, please feel free to leave a nice review, like, and pass the pod on to a friend or colleague.
That's it from us. Join us next week for another episode of Professionally Cannabis.
That phantom parade of love.